Welcome to the brand new Utah Built podcast. I am Jared Banks here with Utah Built to celebrate the people, the faces, the businesses, and the brands that are Utah Built. And here with me on episode 1 and co-host of the Utah Built podcast, Kimball Kjar. How are you, brother?
Good, man. Good to be here.
Super excited about Utah Built. Tell me about how the Utah Built kind of idea came about. Like, where does this come from?
Yeah, I mean, the long short of it is really we began to do this Utah Built marketing campaign for the Utah Warriors, right? The team that we founded, the team that we've been a part of for the last 6-7 years of our life. But, you know, we began to realize that Utah Built concept had its own life, right? That it wasn't just a story about the Warriors, because that's really how it was started. Was we wanted to be able to tell the stories of the players, we wanted to tell the stories of our staff, and kind of the unique elements that made the Warriors such a cohesive part of the community here in the state of Utah and what makes Utah great. But with that kind of came this concept of, you know, people began to resonate, especially businesses, with that idea of everything that we were trying to build with the ideas of dedication, pioneering spirit, humility, innovation, everything that goes into being Utah, right? With all the peculiarities as well as...
Well, I was going to say, it's such a unique experience being from Utah because of all the little idiosyncrasies that go along with it, right? Yeah. Like, obviously, the religious implications that go on with the pioneer founding of the state, but now the entrepreneurial aspect of it, because so many young businesses, there's so many startups, there's so many people who really cut their teeth in business here and are now operating at a high level, right? And they're just people that you may have gone to high school with.
Yeah, and you know, the Utah Built identity really is about telling those stories, whether you were born here or whether you're an adopted son or daughter, right? Whether you came to the state and you've added value to its history by, you know, coming and working for one of these teams, these tech companies, these businesses, or you've relocated here from California because you got a really good exchange rate on your home. You know, like everyone else has moved here to the state of Utah in the last 4 or 5 years.
Utah's full, y'all. All right. Just saying, Utah's full.
But so being able to tell these stories is something that we felt could add value. And, you know, this is a kind of it's a pivot. It's not necessarily Utah Warriors only. We're going to be talking to guys like John Kimball, the CEO of Real Salt Lake. We're going to be talking to Jim Olson, president of Utah Jazz, Jeremy Andrus, the CEO and founder of Traeger Grills. We're going to be talking to people that make this state what it is, and their stories, their businesses' experiences, their stories, everything that just makes Utah. That's Utah Built. That's what we're going to be talking about.
It is a special experience, and I can't wait to hear some of these stories because there's so much more that goes into it rather than just seeing the brands on a wall, right? And that's really what Utah Built is all about. It's about bringing these brands and these personalities together and giving us a place to share our story rather than let somebody else tell it. Let's tell it ourselves. So make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, go to utah-built.com if you want to get more, and let's all connect here in the heart of our great state of Utah as part of Utah Built. That's what we are all about. So here we go with episode 1, and very conveniently, our guest today, founding member of Major League Rugby, founding father of the Utah Warriors. Is that a little? Am I building this up a little too much for you?
You might be getting a little bit too much pomp and circumstance here. I don't know that we need to be getting any sort of ticker tape parade or anything. But you know, listen.
The man I affectionately call Hefe. Let's talk about your journey now in being Utah Built and being that founding president of the Utah Warriors and one of those founding pillars of Major League Rugby.
Yeah, this story. I have to go back to, you know, what we did on LinkedIn this last winter and spring, where I finally decided to just kind of bare my soul and tell my story of what happened with the Utah Warriors in our first 5 to 6 years of existence. Because, you know, the more I began to think about it, the more I began to realize, like, there's a lot of the same stories that guys like, you know, Ryan Smith and John Huntsman and all these other folks, I'm not trying to compare myself to them, but there's relatable stories that every entrepreneur and every business person has gone through. The sleepless nights, the anxiety, the stress, the family problems,
My favorite was and you put it, the naivete of the whole situation.
Yeah, like
right?
You have all the best expectations in the world that everything's going to work out great until you get smacked in the face 4 or 5 times. You're like, what am I doing? This is the craziest thing that I've ever been a part of. And if people were to ask me that then as to what I'd say now, yeah, this is probably one of the craziest things I could have done in my entire life. But being able to kind of share that story with people was somewhat cathartic for me. But it also has been, I think an emboldening thing here for our organization, for the players, the staff, even our community, to be able to understand that the Utah Warriors, we didn't come in here on a billionaire's back. We came in just like anyone else that started a business here in the state of Utah, through the lean years, the peanut butter and jelly years, as I like to call them. And, we've made it through those years, and we've got a bright future, just like all these other businesses. So yeah, that's the story.
Let's back this up then. Who is Kimball Kjar? Tell me about young Kimball, where you came from, and kind of the very humble beginnings of what brought you to the point where you could make a decision like starting the Utah Warriors.
Well, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go.
Give me the Reader's Digest, short and condensed, speed dating version of where you grew up, your family background a little bit. Get us through like your college years, and let's talk about the connection to the sport of rugby, and then that'll lead us into everything
Awesome.
else.
So, I'm pretty much born and bred here in Utah. We moved away for about 7 years when I was a kid. My dad did his medical training back east, and we moved back when I was about 7, and put up roots in Bountiful. So I'm a Davis County kid, kind of born and bred. Loved all things sports from the day that I was a little kid. Loved soccer, loved football, loved basketball, played in junior jazz, played Ute Conference football, begged my parents to let me play tackle football when I was an 8-year-old kid. But then, found an affinity for other sports like wrestling when I got into high school, middle school and high school. And I just loved anything and everything that could push the boundaries of what it was that you're trying to do physically, particularly the ones that were a little bit more physical. Basketball was never really quite my forte. I, grew up during the John Stockton and the Karl Malone years, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to be the next John Stockton. I'm going to wear some nice short shorts, and we're going to have, the next Kimball Kjar is going to be the next Utah Jazz, famous guy.
Well, you got the short shorts part of your future, right?
The wrong ones, right? But I got more fouls than I got points when I was playing basketball, and I just loved the stuff that was physical. Don't know what it was. That was just kind of my thing.
So how did you find rugby?
So I was actually going down to BYU to go wrestle. I didn't have a scholarship. They had like a preferred walk-on kind of thing, and that was back in the day when BYU used to have a wrestling program. And going down another wrestle, and I just realized, you know what? You got to be one of two things. You either got to be like completely kooky. You got to have a couple screws loose if you're going to wrestle at the collegiate level, because it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
Two a day, all year long.
The weight cuts.
Cutting weight. I hated cutting weight.
We talk about being fit in rugby. There is no fitness in the world like match fitness for wrestling at the D1 collegiate level.
Well, and any kid, just taking a bit of an aside, any kid that I ended up coaching that was a wrestler, you knew the kid could work hard. You knew he was a grinder, and he could do the things that you asked him to do. And that was kind of me. I went down to BYU and I said, listen, I don't really want to wrestle, but I do want to do something BYU sports. I grew up as a big BYU fan with my grandparents. My grandpa was a big executive in radio for Bonneville and KSL, and so they were always big BYU fans, throughout their entire lives. So I was kind of raised for good or for bad in that, that blue blood, right? So I wanted to do something BYU. I couldn't do football. I was too small. And my roommate said, why don't you go try out for the rugby team? I said, well, crap. I've had a bunch of friends that have played at Highland. This is back in the mid-90s. And they were doing really well. I had a couple friends that played for that. There was a Davis club up there as well. And they had been trying to get me to go out and play rugby all that time when I was in high school, but I just never did it because wrestling was in the way. I'd do freestyle and Greco and other stuff in the Springs. I said, great, go for it. So I went out, tried out for the rugby team. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the rules. I didn't even know there was an offside line in rugby until like halfway through my freshman year, honestly. I kid you not. And I could just literally go sideline to sideline because, to your point, I was just so fit. I could literally just keep running until my head fell off. And I loved it. I loved the physicality, but at the same time, I loved the fact that, you know, I could get involved and carry the ball and pass the ball and do other things, whereas in American football, you can't do that stuff, right? You can't, you know, unless...
If you're a lineman, there's no way you're going to be touching
if you're
the football.
the left tackle, I don't know how those guys keep doing what they do week in and week out. Like, kudos to them, but, like, I couldn't be one of those guys. I had a hard enough time running the old school Nebraska High at Bountiful High School, you know, where I was a wide receiver and I'd maybe see the ball once a game. I was just out there blocking half the time. So, I fell in love with it. And then I went on an LDS mission to Australia, to Brisbane, Australia. And that is kind of really where, after my freshman year, rugby really began to kind of sink its roots into me, where rugby in Australia is a part of the culture, not so much like New Zealand where you lived quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
But there's rugby and there's rugby league, and rugby is still a part of the culture and the community. Once you see what it can do for a community and what the impact of the sport has on a community, I just got hooked for life. And that's kind of where I ended up, you know, the leaping off point back in 2000 when I made the national team. And, you know, there's, dare I say, the rest is history, but that's really was the...
You say the rest is history. You played in a World Cup, like you got to travel the world playing
I came off the
sport.
bench. I came off the bench in the World Cup. Just to be clear, it was 17 minutes of World Cup play.
It's 17 more minutes than I have.
All of those, listen, I played with the national team for 6-7 years and some amazing experiences. You know, you get to travel the world. You get to do all those, you know, you build some great relationships with some amazing people, not only on the U.S. team, but also on the opposition teams that you get to know. You know, there's just so much good that comes out of all of that stuff that happens at the international level.
You know, we talk about it almost to a cliche, the rugby community, but it really is an interconnectivity globally between all the people that participate in our sport, particularly at the level that you were able to get to. I was never able to play it that way.
Yeah, but even still.
And I still am super connected globally with so many people.
Well, and you know, you guys still play in the Ruggerfest stuff. You guys still play in a lot of those bigger tournaments where, you know, there's still people that used to play with the All Blacks and, you know, for the French national team and
So, fun story, at Ruggerfest a few years ago, I was playing with a touring side, and Pedri Wenenberg, rest in peace, came up to me and he said, Jared, I want you to start at tight head for us. And I said, Pedri, are you sure? Because I'm looking up and down the sideline, and I see guys that played for England. I see guys that played for France. I see guys that played for Tonga. I see guys that played for Samoa. I see guys that played for the USA. And he goes, no, I want you to start for us. Okay. And so I go out, and it's us versus the Gentlemen of Aspen. And if you know anything about the Gentlemen of Aspen, another incredibly storied rugby club, local Rocky Mountain connection, they have a bunch of imports on their team.
Yeah.
And I look across at their 15, and I look across at the other 14 guys on my side of the field, and I am the only player on the field that did not have a professional rugby career or an international cap to his name.
Are you kidding me?
And I looked at Pedri and I said, what the hell am I doing here? And he goes, Lekker bro, you're good, let's go. And we ran out and we ended up winning that final, and it was one of the most fun games I played in. But,
well, and listen, that's not to digress, but like that's the amazing thing about rugby, right? Is like even just this last weekend, you know, when the Warriors played San Diego, you had Ma'ananu there, arguably one of the greatest centers in the history of the game, all time. And he is so down to earth. He's taking photos with the fans in and around the field. I mean, he had, you know, people 2 or 3 deep wanting to spend time with him, and he took time with everybody that he possibly could. He was out there at least for I want to say a good 45 minutes after the game. And just such an impressive soul and humble soul. That's
and
what
it's
makes
one of the
rugby
things, though, that sets our sport apart, too, though,
Yeah.
is the approachability of the people, the players, and the personalities to the fans and the direct connection. Because globally, and you know this, those guys are all connected to local clubs.
Yeah.
Many of them still play and give back to their local clubs and their senior sides after they're done playing professional rugby. So that all brings us to this turning point in the life of Kimball Kjar and your family and everyone else that you know.
Yeah, the masochism.
When did you decide that you were going to go all in on not just creating a professional rugby franchise here in Utah, but that there was also a need to be one of the founding partners in Major League Rugby? Like, how does that decision come about? And you're the guy that goes, I've got to put my hand up and lead the charge.
Yeah, listen, we may need to go the scenic route here, but I'll try to keep it short. I mean, listen, Utah's history with rugby deserves the Warriors. And that's been my thought process. Call it the Warriors or call it whatever you wanted to call it. Utah needed to have and deserved to have a professional rugby team in the state.
Because you're talking about over a half century of rugby history here at the highest level.
Well, and you even go back to the community of Iosipa, and you go back to the Polynesian roots here in the state of Utah that goes back to the late 19th century. I mean, there's such a connection with the international community because of the LDS roots, but also just the expat community that's found itself here in the state of Utah. That rugby is a part of our DNA. Some people may not necessarily know it as much, but rugby is a part of our DNA. And when I began to kind of transition from playing, with the national team, I went on to coach, give back to my alma mater at BYU, and I helped coach my little brother's team when he was at BYU there at the end in like 2005 and 6, and then I officially began to really coach, dare I say, full time, with BYU in 2008, kind of fall of 2007, early 2008. And that's when we really began to push hard to help BYU become a national champion. We ended up winning our first national championship in 2009. We would go on to win 5 other national championships while I was there, and I left coaching BYU in 2015. At that point, that's when there was sort of this inflection period, where I kind of had to decide, all right, well, I love this sport. I love this community. I have been a part of the national team. I had sat on USA Rugby's international athlete as the board is an international athlete,
and in the middle of all this, seen 2 failed professional leagues come and go.
So we saw pro.
There was pro, and then there was Super League that both came and went.
Yeah, Super League. I don't know if I'd even put it so much in that professional range, but
I'll say there was
trying.
An attempt.
They were trying to. They were trying to create a competition that could be sustainable at the high end. Mm-hmm. Pro was actually truly paying the players the way that they should, and yada, yada, yada. But that was when, in 2015, when I kind of began to realize, like, there's an opportunity here to do something special, not only for rugby in the United States, but for the state of Utah. And that's when we began to hear about pro. The guy that started that, if you recall, his name was Doug Schoninger. He had a very eccentric and very unique personality that when you sat down and talked to him, and we began to say, well, you're starting this league, we think Utah should be a part of professional rugby. Tell us about your plan. And there wasn't really a plan. Like, I remember one meeting specifically, we were, I forget where it was. It was at like a USA Rugby Congress meeting or like National Development Summit, maybe in Denver or Philadelphia or somewhere, I forget. And he was there trying to push and lobby and promote some of the stuff that he was doing. He came in and he had 15 papers of just like loose bound legal notebook paper that were just scribbled on like my 5-year-old kid had been just scratching with crayons on. I'm kind of like, he's leafing through these papers and these numbers, and I'm thinking, there's no way that someone that can't even just organize his thoughts and kind of himself is going to be able to put together a fully bona fide professional rugby business plan that's going to end up making sense. Mm-hmm. And that to me was kind of, I hate to say it, to be so judgmental, but after he rambled on about, this plan and that plan and this and this and that, paper example was all I really needed to see, because there was nothing that was going to come from what we began to see from pro. Plus, you look in the United States, and there hasn't ever been a monolithic professional league that's ever been sustainable, mm-hmm. scalable. You look at you look at pro, you look at the American Alliance Football League. If once that single owner begins to kind of feel the pain of having to stroke that much money, all those checks for that period of time before it even begins to gain a modest amount of momentum, it's just too much. Mm-hmm. So that's when we began to realize, okay, if something's going to happen here in the United States, we've got to do something different. USA Rugby wasn't really in a good place. I believe they had just actually figured out, or were about to go into bankruptcy with the first time with RIM, if you remember. And all the fun and the chaos that was around that. So we like, okay, well, USA Rugby's not going to be able to do anything here. World Rugby's not going to be able to do anything here. So we've got to figure out a privately, sustainable model that's going to make sense. And unfortunately, where I kind of came into the conversation, for right or wrong, I was in and around all of those USA Rugby Congress meetings and some of those conversations. And having been a former international player and some of the stuff that I was doing with BYU, I kind of got sucked into some of these early stage, discussions.
For lack of a better term, you were guilty by association.
Kind of.
In the development phase.
Kind of, in a way, but the long short of it is I was the guy that ended up having to, say, listen, if Utah's going to be involved, again, kind of going back to my opening thought, that Utah deserves something. If Utah's going to be involved, if not me, then who? And I hate to say it that way because it sounds somewhat arrogant, but mm-hmm. I was probably the best positioned person to be able to help rugby here in Utah be able to do what it could do. And, it wasn't like it was something that I wanted, that I sought out in a way. It was something I was passionate about. Don't get me wrong. I'm super happy and grateful that we did, but it wasn't like I was specifically looking for an opportunity to create a rugby job for myself.
So all of that goes on. You go through the meetings, the scattered papers, the Congress, the bankruptcy of USA Rugby, and all of these things. Tell me about the moment, and I can imagine it in my head almost like a sitcom. You're lying in bed with your wonderful bride, and you've got to explain to her that I want to take this leap. How does that conversation go with your wife?
Well, it was... she's going to listen to this, and she's going to have, let's just say she's going to have a very...
Should we have her on next week to get her to tell her side of the story?
Probably. and you know what? She's probably going to say that I don't remember that conversation, and I don't remember, having this discussion. He kind of just went ahead and did it. And, candidly, I think that's really what happened. If I look back on it, it was kind of like the momentum just began to build, and we tested this idea and we got to, to this point, and then we kind of tested this idea and got to this point, and we kept getting further and further and further down the track, where until about 2016, 17, we had critical mass. And I was like, well, I'm kind of the only person left holding the bag here. So I've got to, the only way that we're going to get out of this, honey, is through. And that's when, in about 2017, we decided that we had to make that decision, that we're gonna commit ourselves to this path, and we're gonna figure it out, but we're gonna get through it by just shouldering up and going. Because up to that point, there was a lot of, I had been keeping my other businesses sort of on the side to try to keep a bit of an
Some
income.
kind of money coming in for the family.
And then once the Warriors and the rugby stuff began to pick up momentum, it was like I couldn't do that anymore. And at that point, it was like you either got to go this way or you got to go that way. And that was in about the fall of 2017 when my business partner Justin and I kind of dissolved our Venator Ventures recruiting business and some of the other things that we were doing, divested ourselves of the office building that we had together and some of the other businesses that we had. And he graciously went off and pursued his stuff, and I graciously went and pursued my stuff. And that's when it just became, dare I say, full bore.
That was the gig.
That was it.
This wasn't a side hustle anymore.
No.
This wasn't a passion project.
No.
That this was it.
Yeah. And back then, I wasn't taking a salary. We had no money. The Warriors or Rugby Utah Ventures at the time. We didn't know that we were going to be called the Warriors at the time. We had literally nothing to our name, and I was out. We started with 4 partners, and those 4 partners eventually kind of changed and devolved into just me. One of them jumped ship early. 2 of them tried to hang on and try to do some things, but there wasn't really anything of substance that was being done on their part. So we had to kind of figure out, gracious ways for them to exit stage left. And throughout that entire time, I was the person that was kind of just carrying the water. I was having to not only help with the rugby stuff, but I was having to figure out where we're going to get money, where we're going to try to get, our...
Well, and there's no business model for that, though. Like, if you're starting an IT company, people have done that before.
Yeah.
If you're starting a clothing brand, people have done that before.
Yeah.
Nobody had successfully built a league yet here in America. So there has to, like, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, to build something like that here in Utah, you kind of had to learn the hard way a little bit and take your lumps, right?
Oh, for sure. And you bring up a good point, which is like no one had ever really successfully done this in the U.S. And so really all we had to really go off of, and this is where I kind of have to thank my mentor, one of my mentors. We had a few, but the biggest one that had the biggest impact on our early success or the early days of what we were doing was a guy by the name of Dean House. One of the partners in and around the Real Salt Lake early days. He was the one that sort of helped put the stadium plan together and everything else with Dave Checketts, and he was one of the governors that sat with on the MLS board for a number of years for RSL, until eventually he sold out his portion to Deloitte, and then eventually Deloitte ended up buying out the rest from Dave. So Dean knew a lot of this stuff, and so we used a lot of his experience. And if you kind of, when we were looking to build something that was sustainable, kind of going back to the difference of the pro model versus the MLR model, is the MLR model is in effect the exact same business model as an entity as Major League Soccer, right? It's what's called the single entity business model, which means that the teams own the league. And so the thought process there is that if you get X number of teams, you look at them kind of like a table with, the teams being the legs of the table. If one of those legs begins to get a little bit wobbly and unstable, then the other ones can hold it up. It's only when
we've seen that with 3 different
Yeah,
franchises in the league and the struggles and the growth.
And to be fair, and just to kind of make a comment on that, like we've actually shown that business model, we knew that there was going to be problems. We knew there was going to be issues. There was going to be struggles, just like there was in the MLS in the early days. They had contraction. They went from 12 to 10 teams early on before Real Salt Lake came on board. So we've kind of seen a lot of those similar ups and downs through our early days, and it was to be expected. And we knew that we needed to have an incentive model that kept everybody aligned so that, okay, my well-being as Team A is aligned with Team B, because guess what? We own this together. Mm-hmm. We're partners. I'm not going to undermine you. You're not going to undermine me. If you do, we've got an operating agreement that's going to help take care of that. But anyways, point is that we used all of those same lessons that we had seen from Dean and from the MLS to kind of help us set up a little bit of what we were doing with the Warriors. And then obviously Dean came into the room into Houston in late 2016, where we met for kind of the first time in that very, very first meeting with a bunch of these rugby heads at the invitation of the Houston, well, they're now the Sabercats, but I think they were the Strikers back then. Mm-hmm. And that's where the initial beginnings of Major League Rugby began. And Dean was invited to be effectively the first commissioner. He helped put everything together, and that's what kind of got us going.
So when we look at Major League Rugby, if you want to say that was Genesis, it was that meeting.
It was that meeting.
That's where all the major stakeholders came together with somebody who said that we can make something happen here. That was it.
Yeah. So it was kind of ironically, this is something that probably not too many people know of or are aware of, but the person that kind of threw all of this together, for good or for bad, is a guy by the name of Thierry Dupont. He was the one that was calling all of these different teams. They had started to try to put together a professional club in Austin, if you recall, mm-hmm. The Huns. Mm-hmm. This is back in 2014 and 15. And they were trying to professionalize things ahead of everyone else. And he was sort of the ringleader for that group. And he was the one that kind of came with this idea of, well, I've got this sponsor, and he's very French, right?
Go ahead, do it. It's all right.
I've got this sponsor. We're going to create a professional league, and you had all these different ideas, right, on how things could be pulled together. And it was. I don't want to call it this sort of, fellowship of the ring moment or anything, where everybody's kind of coming to figure out how to save Middle Earth or whatnot. But I mean, you had Seattle there, you had, Utah was there, you had Glendale was there, you had the Houston guys,
the Austin guys, obviously.
The Austin guys, you had some guys from, I think the Ombak. I'd have to go back through my notes, but there was at least 7 or 8 people.
Was the Nyack crew involved, the New York guys at that point?
I don't think they were.
No?
at that point. I think the Nyack and like the Chicago guys like Tony Rio and some of the other folks kind of came into the picture a little bit later. But that was the meeting that sort of aligned that group and said, okay, we can do this. Let's use the MLS model. Let's build an operating agreement. And let's go. Done. And from there...
it's easy as that. Done, right? Sure.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, and this is one thing that Dean used to always say to me, and I used to get browbeat, by him, for good or for bad, as any good mentor would, where, I'd go into his office and he'd be like, Kimball, you do realize this is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your entire life. I'm like, what are you talking about? From a guy who's literally already walked over the coals himself, right? Yeah. And again, this kind of goes back to that naivete. Like, in my naivete, I said to myself, I've started other businesses. I've done other things. Those have been difficult. Those have been hard. But, what do you mean? Like, you're going to have a hard time. Like, this is something that's going to be supremely difficult. I don't think you fully comprehend what you're walking into. And really what he was trying to do at the time was, was just trying to prepare, my emotional and mental resolve, knowing that we were going to fail a lot. Mm-hmm. And we did early on. And there were tons and tons of struggles. But he got us at least to that point where mentally we knew, okay, even though this is going to be hard, we're going to keep working at it and we'll figure it out. That was really what he was saying. It was like, you do realize it's going to be hard. So but what we can get this.
That moment? Like, if you look back in hindsight now, because we're talking, this is the 6th year of the league.
Yeah.
This process has been going on for the better part of a decade. What would you say, if you look back in hindsight now, that low moment was? What was that moment where you thought, I'm either going to give up and this is all going to fold, or it can't suck any worse. Let's make the next right decision and keep moving forward.
Well,
can you pinpoint a moment?
There's a few, and I'll try to keep them short. But when you're in the middle of these entrepreneurial things, and when you're in the middle of something like this, I've come to learn and appreciate that there really is never a right decision. It's the least not good one. right?
That's fair.
Yeah. Like you've just got to you've got to pick one and go. And
that the hardest part of the decision making is simply making a decision, for better or worse.
Yeah, you
do something and go for it.
The worst thing you can do in anything with business or otherwise is to just not do anything, to just get into that, paralysis by analysis scenario. And you're never really going to ever arrive at what is the absolute 100% right decision. And we had a series of those, but without going into to a bunch of them, there's two that kind of stand out. The first one is I had now had to take over a lot of the fundraising duties. I had actually been paying a lot of the Warriors operational stuff out of my own money, the savings that we had. I wasn't having an income, so I had to take out a second mortgage to try to provide for my own family. Take care of their stuff. I was still trying to do a little bit of my other business on the side, but there wasn't like I'd get a paycheck every 5-6 months. And then it was just like, okay, let's try to pay off our credit cards and try to get back to net neutral. But there was a moment where we had to make the first capital call to the MLR for 2018. And there was a decision there that was like, okay, we didn't have an owner. We didn't have like someone that could financially fund an operating budget of, even $2 or $3 million. I couldn't do that, and we didn't have a partner that could help us do that yet. So I had to make a decision as sort of the operating partner of the organization at the time. Well, do we shut it down, go into hibernation, keep pitching and try to find an owner, not participate in 2018, and just kind of see if we can get things back up and running? Or do we just figure it out somehow, get through 2018, try to show proof of concept, try to get like an MVP, dare I say, of what we're trying to do with this brand, and come back to it and try to sell the team along the way? Because there was, again, going back to my original statement, like Utah deserved the Warriors, or Utah deserved professional rugby. I felt like if we didn't do something, that window of opportunity would pass us by, and future teams wouldn't want us. Utah's always kind of being perceived as like, well, it's kind of a weird community. It's small market.
Isolated out here in the Rocky Mountains.
Still
the smallest market in the league.
Yeah, so I was concerned that, we had been helping drive this. We had helped, bring Dean into the conversation, and he was being amazing at what he was doing. And, Nick Benson at the time was, deputy commissioner, and he was, helping do that as well. And all of that was based out here in Utah. And all of a sudden I was like, well, crap, you can't not have a Utah team. So the first decision we had to make there was, how do we fund this? And after multiple conversations, scenarios, we got a number of investors to come in at like, $15K, $20K, $25K. But, listen, that's not going to ever move the needle.
Nowhere close to what it needed to be.
Especially where you're going to need to be sustainable. You're going to have to be stroking multiple checks. And that's when I was kind of lamenting to my parents. And my parents came to me and said, let us help you out. Let us put our house up for on a mortgage, and let us fund the team for the first year. And at the time, I'm like, I was so stressed and so anxious with everything else that was going on, trying to figure out how we're going to keep this team together. I didn't even almost process what they were saying at the time. And it just ended up kind of being this sort of white noise where I like, so hold on, you want to like mortgage your home and give us 6 figures of healthy money.
You're going to take the equity out of your personal residence to fund what essentially is your pet project.
My pet project that who knows if it's going to be around in 12 to 18 months. Like, honestly, like that was part of the issue for any investor that we were talking to. They're like, you're not only starting a team, but you're starting a league. And that league, nothing's been proven up to that point to have worked here in the United States. Mm-hmm. And every smart investor was saying to us, hell no. Like, you're like I
talk to us in 5 to 10 years when you've actually got something.
Yeah, I'm not throwing my good money after bad.
But Mom did.
Well, and so that was the first one. That was like the first moment, that first hurdle where my parents did that for us. But where it got even more critical for me was that money only took us so far. And then some of the other money that I continued to try to kind of string things along on my own. We got into 2018, kind of part of 2019. My cousin Luke came on board for another big chunk, but again, it was like a one big investment tranche. He had purposely set up front that this is probably something he's not going to do long term. Mm-hmm. So that got us through 2019, but we still hadn't paid off my parents' note, right? So they're carrying this big, massive debt on their home for, a couple years. And we get to 2019 and we had just got through that second season and well, it dried up again, right? We didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do. I mean, up to that point, like I was having sleepless nights. There was a couple times my wife could say that I would wake up in the middle of the night. I just had a pit in my stomach and I couldn't sleep. And I'd be kind of, I don't want to say convulsing on the floor, but I would just be literally just overwhelmed with like, how am I going to help take care of these players, these staff members? How are we going to make this work? How am I going to, I still hadn't even been taking a paycheck for the majority of that time. And we got into the late end of 2019 and we had effectively made a deal where we were going to sell the team to another MLR ownership group. And, they graciously gave us a bridge loan to help us cover some early capital calls that came at the end of 2019. And I got a text message literally out of the blue. I don't know if people really understand the narrative or the story behind this from reading my LinkedIn message or my LinkedIn stories, but I got a message literally out of the blue from someone I didn't know, and he said the message was effectively, I wish I still had it. It's on one of my older iPhones that I've gotten rid of, but it effectively said, "Hey, hi Kimball. My name is so-and-so. I'm a friend of Corey Olson. You know Corey Olson very, very well.
Very good dude.
Yeah. Policeman, good all-around rugby guy."
Shouts out to South Track Apparel, by the way. Corey runs that as well as being a cop now.
Yeah. And he knew Corey and said that he's interested in investing in rugby. And that was it. Now, at the time, like in 2019, I was getting people texting me, emailing me, reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I want to invest. I want to do 5K. I want to do this. At that point, I was just like, I'm done taking the onesies and twosies and these small little investors. We've got to figure out a way to bring on like a big hitter to really make this thing work." So, no offense to Corey, but I was kind of triangulating, like if he's associated with a guy that was a cop, how is this guy, going to be the right version?
Shouts out to Corey Olson, by the way, but I get it. Like, you don't think that Corey runs in those Robin Leach lifestyles of the rich and famous kind of circles, right?
Well, you never know, because
you get that message with a little skepticism. I love you, Corey.
I had heard Corey was doing like a lot of undercover stuff at the time, so I didn't know if like he had been like hanging out with the cartel.
This is a Walter White situation.
Yeah,
is he the one who knocks?
If I needed to watch out for my life or something, a bit of clickbait here, but listen, I honestly I didn't respond to this text for about 4 days. And there was something that just kind of told me, you know what, just out of respect, respond to this individual, and just see where it goes. Sure enough, I did. And the long short of it is this individual who is essentially our current owner, who's very private individual. His family comes from the McKnight family that was involved with 3M and Honeywell through those early days in Minnesota. They have an organization called Tamarack Fund, their family office, that invests in dozens and dozens of different businesses. And he had played rugby when he was in college. He actually was a ski racer at Colorado and picked up rugby a little bit while he was there. Fell in love with it, played a little bit of rugby in graduate school, and he just decided to, as all smart people do, you go to Columbia and get your MBA. But, he was going to go and kind of go down that private equity and venture capital route, and he decided that wasn't really for him, and he wanted to do something with a little bit more meaning, and he's decided to go into work for the federal government. So, but he also has his business that he runs on behalf of his family, this Tamarack Fund, and what ended up happening is just because of that one text message response, we've been able to pay off my parents' mortgage. We've been able to pay off all the other debts that we'd been kind of incurring up to that point. And the Utah Warriors now actually has an owner that is committed to, the vision of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. We've gotten through the peanut butter and jelly years that I like to call them, because, our guys, literally our players, unfortunately, were living off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at trainings. And, it wasn't.
I remember those days being in here.
I mean, I felt bad at the time, but I was trying to do the very best that we could in order to I was trying to help the team, but at the same time, every step, like if there was a penny on the ground, I'd pick it up to help the company do what it needed to do. So, listen, those were kind of the two big inflection points. Was, we stumbled into this beginning and we're part of the early foundation, but how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to get it done? Parents come in. That was the big one that just saved our bacon. And then we got through the next year and a half, and then we had another inflection point where we were going to have to sell everything, and it would have been in the hands of someone else. I probably wouldn't be here today if we'd have done that.
And then
I responded, along comes Tamarack, because of one text message that I responded to in early December of 2019.
And to bring us full circle, part of that connectivity in the rugby community. We're talking about a guy who I played with, local club rugby with Park City Haggis, and a guy that I knew, that we played the game because we loved the game. There was never any opportunity for us to play professional. There was for Corey, a little bit, because he's significantly younger than I am, but and he's a significantly better player than I was. But,
Is he's a former Utah guy, right?
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, I was just thinking, that's the other thing. Like, people want to make this like BYU versus Utah versus, this club, the high school club versus that club. Like, listen, the rugby community here in Utah is amazing in and of itself, right? It's
the interconnectivity of it.
It's too small of a world, and we help lift each other up. And, Corey was, I think, Warrior, because he played for us in that first season. He was Warrior number 5 or number 6. And there's so many of those types of guys that have been a part of this Warriors family that are now going on and doing amazing things. But that one right there, I didn't know that one relationship that we had was going to end up being, dare I say, the saving grace for this entire organization and how we're set up for now.
Where we are now.
Yeah.
So, from a business standpoint, just a couple more questions here. What is one thing you wish you knew before you started, and what is one thing you're glad you didn't know?
I'll answer the last one first. I'm glad I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I'm glad I didn't know how diabolically difficult it was going to be on me and my family for 2.5 years. And I don't make that about me. It's just, had I known that we were going to be scrimping and scrambling, and I was going to be seeing medical professionals and doctors and going on prescriptions to help with my anxiety and stress and all sorts of things. I don't know that I would have done it, if I'm being completely honest with you, at the time. Now, having gone through the lived experience, I am so glad I did. I'm so glad I did, because now it's made me a stronger and a better person because of it. It's made me a better husband, a better father. It's made me hopefully a better person, to my friends and, the other people that we associate with here at the Warriors organization and throughout the MLR. But, there's one thing I do wish I would have known more before, is just some of the intricacies of, dare I say, finance. That's one thing. I'm not the strongest person when it comes to accounting and finance and everything else. I'm more of the entrepreneur, big picture person. And when you're talking to investors and you're talking, cap tables and, preferreds and this and that on what it is, I wasn't the most eloquent when it came into those sorts of things. And I think a lot of the conversations that we ended up having with investors were somewhat, scared away because of little old Kimball and the entrepreneur not necessarily knowing as much. I think anyone that's going to be going into business, that's going to be an entrepreneur, needs to have some of that fundamental awareness of what's going on.
That literacy, that acumen that goes along.
Yeah,
with.
I mean, if you're going to be asking someone for money in some way, shape, or form, then you need to know what you're asking. You've got to be able to have cogent spreadsheets, business plans, ask documents, and everything else that you're going to be trying to do in order to be able to get the result that you want.
So you sound like you're speaking Portuguese already to me.
I saw you glazing over, but I didn't know if it was just my general approach to the story or.
Okay, one more question here, Kimball.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you as a local kid and now a significant and prominent member of the business community? What does it mean to you to be Utah built?
Well, significant and prominent is a stretch, but a grateful contributor to that community for sure. Listen, the four characteristics of our marketing campaign for Utah Built were dedication, humility, innovation, and that pioneering spirit. And that experience that we've had over the last 6-7 years with the Warriors, Rugby Utah Ventures, I dare say has hit on all four of those characteristics. It's taken dedication, not only from me, but from others in this organization, dedication of the Tamarack Fund to commit to giving us the financial runway to being successful, the dedication of our players, the literal blood, sweat, and tears of these guys like Lance Williams and Sai Ohila and Angus McClellan and so many others that have been with us since day one. They saw the chaos of the early days, and now they're living in kind of our present state of being. And that takes commitment, and that's some major gratitude that I have for that. Innovation, we're trying to do something that's never been done. That's that same pioneering spirit, and but we've got to do all those things with a dose of humility, right? Like we're not the Jazz, we're not RSL, we're not any of these major professional sports. We're going to try to help get this brand the attention that it deserves and that it needs, as well as the sport. But we're going to earn that respect. We're going to earn that through everything that we do on a day in and day out basis, from our marketing interactions, from our ticketing interactions, the fan experience of the games, how the players go out into the community and how they represent what it means to be Utah built. So that's the long-winded version of me saying Utah built to me means that we leave this state better than we found it. That's something that my dad kind of taught us growing up. We'd always have to return a shovel, clean as a whistle. We'd have to return the truck that we borrowed
with the gas tank full
and washed, vacuumed out. That's what the Warriors wants to do. We want to do all of those. We want to be dedicated to our community. We want to be we want to innovate so that we can do something unique and interesting for this state. We want to be the pioneers that are cutting edge and trying to do something unique and different, all because we want to leave this state better than when we found it. That's what Utah Built means to me.
Kimball Kjar, Utah Warriors, Utah Built. So thank you for sharing a piece of your story with us on Utah Built.
This has been cathartic, man. This has been good.
Yeah, you don't need therapy when you've got a microphone, bro.
we gotta get some longer couch chairs here and maybe some pillows. We might have to end up just kind of leaning back and having some
we got
sessions.
The table. You can kick your feet up here a little bit, and we can shrink it out.
Get the kava bowl out here next time, and next thing you know, we're gonna have some dirty water, and we'll be talking some really crazy stuff.
That dirty, muddy water is what soothes the savage soul. Utah Built on Instagram, Facebook, utah-built.com. I am Jared Banks alongside Kimball Kjar, looking forward to continuing to tell the stories about the brands, people, and personalities that are built right here in Utah and that are proud to be Utah Built. So on behalf of Kimball, on behalf of Mason Benson, Billy Ratule, and our entire team here at Utah Built, I am Jared Banks saying thank you, and we'll check you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody.